We're going to start with the former Jets athlete, football player, Joe McKnight, who was killed in a road rage incident. We discussed it a little bit last as it was happening, or not as it was happening, but we discussed it last week a little bit. Today, the sheriff involved in the I believe it's Jefferson Parish. I'll find out if I'm wrong or not in a minute. But the sheriff who was involved had a press conference that was pretty surreal. Pretty surreal in that he was more upset about being trolled on the internet by people who were angry. I'm not even going to call it trolling, right? So the backdrop of the story, for those of you who may not know, Joe McKnight is a black athlete. He was killed in a car road rage incident by a white man. At the crime scene, the man was released and allowed to go home. He was not arrested. He killed a man. He waited for the police, and he was not arrested. So clearly, that's going to set off a lot of anger, a lot of emotions, and rightfully so. Because obviously, if the shoe had been on any other foot, had it been any different dynamic, racial dynamic, if it had been a black person who had killed somebody, they would not go home. But let's just put it like that. No hyperbole needed. They simply would not have gotten the same privilege that this white gentleman got. So in response to the fact that the police officers, the sheriff's officers allowed Gasser, I believe his last name was, Ronald Gasser is the gentleman who shot Joe McKnight. They allowed him to go free. And in response to that, everybody, social media, activists, left and right, it was just absurd. And they let it be known. So in this press conference today, where the sheriff's officer was Sheriff Normand was supposed to be announcing the arrest of Ronald Gasser, he instead used this as an opportunity to lecture the black community, to lecture and to show his disdain and his anger and the angst and the pain that he was going through because people on social media lit his ass up. He's more upset about the fact that people were angry than the fact that this man was dead and the culprit was allowed to go free. And he kept casting this in the conversation of the conversation of justice being served, allowing justice to play itself out. This is what Sheriff Normand kept saying. Here's the problem. If your interpretation of justice allows a man who just murdered someone in a road rage incident to go home, your interpretation of justice is screwed up from the beginning. That is not justice. Justice taking its course. See, and it goes to the stand your ground. I don't know if there's stand your ground in Louisiana, but this is very similar, very reminiscent of the issue with Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. George Zimmerman wasn't arrested for, I believe, 30, 60 days after he killed Trayvon Martin because he, quote unquote, had the right to stand his ground. Stand your ground, which is brought to you in part by ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Committee. Stand your ground empowers cowards to run around the country as vigilantes, killing people, and to get recognition from the authorities by allowing these sons of bitches to go home and to not be immediately arrested. That's some empowerment that is some insane, perverse justice, if you want to call that justice, Sheriff Normand. So he's so upset because of how the community and how the nation in general reacted to the fact that they allowed this miscarriage of justice. This man Gasser should have been arrested on the scene. And then if the evidence pointed towards him being innocent or standing his ground or whatever the case, then release him. But no, you let him go home and then say it's about justice. The other thing that he was saying in this conference that was quite ludicrous was that he said that this that this had nothing to do with race. And the way he explained that this had nothing to do with race was by saying that no one reported that there was a racial slur used at the scene. Really? That's your interpretation of how we can tell whether or not something is about race, is because no one at the scene reported hearing a racial slur. This to me goes to and then I just put up the image of Sheriff Norman. He's a man child. He is a feckless bitch baby who does not need to be in charge of a sheriff's department. He is a spineless, sensitive, overly sensitive child who was more upset about getting negative tweets than he was about the death of a man. All right, so I'm sorry. Just had to put that out there for free. So here you go. Here he is saying that because they never heard anyone at the scene report that a racial slur was used, that this obviously didn't have anything to do with race. So long as we allow people to use a childlike definition and understanding of racism as their starting point in a conversation about systemic racism, then they will always play Bobo the Clown the Fool whenever something like this happens. Did he say the N-word? Then it couldn't have been racism. If he didn't say nigger, then it can't be racism. And so long as we allow this imbecilic definition of racism to abound, then we will never. And here's the other thing, folks. I get so tired. I'm not even going to finish that thought yet. I get so tired of having to deal rationally with dumb motherfuckers, like people who are intentionally obtuse. I get tired of having to dissect people who are just childlike in their thinking, blind in their perspective, and intentionally dumb, and demand a level of respect that they would never show you. And if you ever push back against them, then, oh my God, it's the end of the world. Oh my God, I can't believe that we had to suffer this on social media. I get so tired of dealing with children in grown men bodies. Like, what the hell do you do when somebody confronts you in real life, Sheriff Norman? Do you get emotional and get into your feelings, or do you pull your gun, right? See, they're used to being able to push back in real life, right? So in real life, they have the authority of the gun, of lethal force. So of course they could shut up anybody in real life. But social media, that presents kind of a quagmire because they can't literally reach over and arrest somebody that they don't like or provoke a situation that will result in an arrest. So because, this is, and it makes sense now, right? If in real life you are like Sheriff Norman and you've never had someone call you a bitch baby like Ben Dixon just called Sheriff Norman a bitch baby, then in real life you never had that because you've always been able to hide behind a gun. Then of course you can't handle it on social media because you can't literally reach out to somebody and tell them to shut up at the point of the barrel of your gun. I get so tired of having to deal rationally with irrational people. But I guess that's what you come here for. I guess you didn't come here just to hear me call him a overly sensitive man-child son of a bitch. You didn't care to call me, So I'll deal with it on the merits. Okay, back to the merits of the question of his statement. It has everything to do with race. You do not have to call someone the N-word for something to be racist. The mere fact that this man was able to go home after killing a black man when there is I cannot find a single example, and I challenge you to find an example of a black man who killed a white man who was allowed to go home, of a black man who killed a black man and was allowed to go home, of a white man who killed a white man and was allowed to go home. There is an instant devaluation of black lives. Whether it's a black man or black woman or black non-gender conforming individual, there's an instant devaluation when a white person is involved. And we've seen this historically throughout American history. But according to the severely slow thinking capacity of Sheriff Norman, if he didn't say a racial slur, it couldn't have been racism. Oh, God. I don't want to say anything else about this person. Next story.